Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the stars through the main screen. He had been exploring deep space for 12 years now and loved every moment of it. His crew was the best in the human fleet. Navigator Lisa Brooks sat at her station checking star maps. Chief Engineer Ryan Carter was down in the engine room making sure everything ran perfectly. Dr. Helen Torres worked in the medical bay, getting ready for whatever they might find out here in the unknown. They were 3 weeks into their mission when Lisa called. Out from her station. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the sensors," she said while looking at her display. "There's a huge debris field about 2 light hours from our position." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the readings. The debris field was massive, bigger than anything they had ever seen before. "Can you tell what it is?" he asked. Lisa worked on her controls for several minutes before answering. "It looks like the remains of ships, Captain. Lots of them. Maybe 200 or more." She paused and looked up at him with concern in her eyes. "But these aren't human ships. The metal composition is completely different from anything we've ever seen." Jake felt his heart rate increase. First contact with alien technology was something every explorer dreamed about, but it usually didn't happen like this. "Set course for the debris field," he ordered. "But keep our shields up and weapons ready. We don't know what happened out here." The Discovery moved through space toward the mysterious wreckage. As they got closer, the true size of the destruction became clear. Pieces of alien ships floated everywhere, some as big as city blocks. The metal was dark purple and seemed to shimmer in the starlight. Strange symbols covered the hull pieces, but nothing looked familiar to human eyes. "My God," Lisa whispered as she looked at the main screen. "What could have done this? These ships were huge." Ryan's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of energy signature from the center of the debris field. It's very weak, but it's definitely artificial." Jake ordered the ship to move carefully through the wreckage. They had to use the ship's small thrusters to push aside floating pieces of metal. After an hour of careful navigation, they found the source of the energy reading. It was a small escape pod, badly damaged but still powered. "Life signs?" Jake asked Dr. Torres over the communication system. "One life form," she replied quickly. "It's weak but alive. Whatever it is, it's not human." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Bring the pod into our cargo bay. Helen, get ready for emergency medical treatment. We're about to meet our first alien." The crew used the ship's tractor beam to pull the damaged pod inside. As soon as the cargo bay was sealed and filled with air, Jake and Dr. Torres went down to examine their find. The pod was cracked open on one side and they could see inside. What they found was unlike anything they had imagined. The alien was about 7 feet tall with gray skin that looked like it was covered in natural armor. It had 6 limbs, 4 that looked like arms and 2 powerful legs. Its head was elongated with large black eyes that were currently closed. Strange blue blood leaked from several wounds on its body. "It's alive but barely," Dr. Torres said as she ran her medical scanner over the creature. "I need to get it to the medical bay immediately." They carefully moved the alien to the medical bay where Dr. Torres began working to save its life. She had no idea what kind of biology she was dealing with, but she used every skill she had learned treating humans. She stopped the bleeding, stabilized its vital signs, and gave it nutrients through an IV line. For 3 days, the alien remained unconscious while Dr. Torres worked around the clock to keep it alive. Jake stayed close by, knowing that this moment could define humanity's future in the galaxy. On the 4th day, the alien's large black eyes opened. The creature tried to sit up but was too weak. Dr. Torres gently pushed it back down on the medical table. "Easy," she said softly. "You're safe now." The alien looked around the medical bay with confusion and fear. It tried to speak, but only strange, clicking sounds came out. Dr. Torres had prepared for this and brought over a small device that their scientists had built to translate different languages. After several minutes of the device learning the alien's language patterns, it finally produced words they could understand. Where am I?" the alien asked in a weak voice. "You're on a human ship," Jake said as he stepped forward. "We found you in an escape pod. You were badly hurt." The alien's eyes widened with what looked like surprise. "Human? I have heard of your species but never met one." It paused and seemed to gather strength. "My name is HFY. I am of the Korthani Empire." Jake had never heard of the Korthani Empire, but he could see that HFY expected him to recognize the name. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. This is Dr. Helen Torres. She saved your life. HFY looked at Dr. Torres with something that might have been gratitude. You saved the life of a stranger? An alien stranger? That's what doctors do, Dr. Torres replied simply. We help whoever needs help. For a long moment, HFY said nothing. Then he spoke in a voice filled with pain and memory. My fleet is gone. 200 of the Empire's finest warships, destroyed by the Devourers. I am the only survivor. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Devourers? What are Devourers? HFY closed his eyes as if remembering something terrible. Ancient destroyers. They consume everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire systems. We thought we could fight them. We were wrong. The implications of what HFY was saying began to sink in. If something could destroy 200 advanced warships, what would happen when it encountered human space? How many ships did you say they had? Jake asked quietly. Ships? HFY made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. They are not ships, Captain Morrison. They are living creatures, each one the size of a moon, and there are thousands of them moving through space like a plague. Jake and Dr. Torres looked at each other with growing concern. They had rescued one alien, but in doing so, they might have learned about a threat that could destroy all life in the galaxy. HFY continued speaking, his voice getting stronger as Dr. Torres's treatment took effect. But I must ask you something, Captain Morrison. Why did you save me? Your species is unknown to the galactic community. You have no obligation to help a Korthani warrior. Jake thought about the question for a moment before answering. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Something changed in HFY's expression when he heard those words. For the first time since waking up, he seemed truly surprised. The right thing to do, he repeated slowly, as if testing how the words sounded. News of the alien survivor spread through human space faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Captain Morrison's first report, every colony world and space station knew about HFY and his warning about the Devourers. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some humans wanted to help the alien, while others worried about getting involved in galactic affairs they knew nothing about. The situation became more complicated when alien ships appeared at the edge of human space. 12 massive vessels, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, dropped out of faster-than-light travel and sent a message to Earth. The ships belonged to the Galactic Council, an alliance of alien species that had ruled known space for thousands of years. Chancellor Veltar of the Hegemony, the most powerful species in the Council, appeared on communication screens across human space. He was tall and thin with silver skin and 4 arms. His voice was cold and commanding when he spoke. Primitive humans, you have something that belongs to the galactic community. The Korthani survivor must be turned over to proper authorities immediately. Admiral Patricia Hayes, Earth's defense coordinator, watched the message from her office on Luna Station. She was a veteran of the colony wars and had never backed down from a fight, even against impossible odds. She called an emergency meeting with the Human Colonial Assembly. They're demanding we hand over HFY, Admiral Hayes told the assembled representatives. They claim he's spreading panic and false information about these Devourers. Representative Carl Watson from Mars Colony spoke up first. What right do they have to make demands? We've never even heard of this Galactic Council before. That's exactly their point, Admiral Hayes replied. According to their message, humans are classified as a minor species with no rights under galactic law. They see us as children playing with dangerous toys. The debate went on for hours, but in the end the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender HFY to aliens who had never bothered to make peaceful contact before. Captain Morrison was ordered to bring the discovery to Earth, so HFY could speak to the Colonial Assembly directly. When the discovery arrived at Earth, thousands of reporters and citizens gathered to see the first alien visitor to human space. HFY had recovered much of his strength under Dr. Torres's care, but he still moved carefully as he walked down the ship's ramp. His gray armored skin gleamed under Earth's sun, and his forearms moved with a warrior's grace despite his injuries. The Colonial Assembly met in emergency session with HFY as their guest. Representatives from every human world attended either in person or through holographic projection. The alien stood at the center of the Great Hall, looking up at the humans who surrounded him on all sides. Honored representatives, HFY began, his words translated into dozens of human languages. I come before you not as a conqueror or diplomat, but as a witness to horror beyond imagination. He told them about the Korthani Empire, one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy. For centuries, his people had conquered other species and expanded their territory through superior weapons and tactics. They believed themselves to be the ultimate warriors, unbeatable in combat. My fleet was the Empire's finest. HFY continued. 200 warships with crews that had never known defeat. We were sent to investigate reports of missing colonies on the galaxy's edge. What we found there changed everything. The alien's voice grew quiet as he described the Devourer attack. Creatures the size of moons. Living ships that moved through space like swimming through water. The Korthani weapons, which could destroy planets, barely scratched their surfaces. Their shields, strong enough to stop stars from exploding, failed within minutes. We ran, HFY admitted, and the shame in his voice was clear even through the translator. The greatest warriors in the galaxy ran in terror like children, and still they followed us, consuming our ships one by one until only my escape pod remained. Representative Linda Foster from Europa Station asked the question everyone was thinking. If your empire is so powerful, what chance do we humans have against these devourers? HFY looked directly at her when he answered. That is what I have been trying to understand since Captain Morrison saved my life. In all my years of service conquering 17 different species for the Empire, I have never encountered beings like humans. He turned to address the entire assembly, his voice growing stronger. When your Dr. Torres found me dying in that escape pod, she did not hesitate to save my life even though she knew nothing about my biology. When Captain Morrison was ordered to surrender me to the Galactic Council, he chose to protect a stranger rather than avoid conflict with superior forces. The hall fell silent as HFY continued. Your species possesses something that my people lost long ago, something that most galactic civilizations have forgotten. You fight not for conquest or glory, but for principles you believe in. You help others not because you must, but because you choose to. Admiral Hayes stood up from her seat. What exactly are you saying, HFY? The alien warrior looked at her with his large black eyes. I am saying that the galaxy has been looking for strength in all the wrong places. We measure power by the size of our fleets and the destructiveness of our weapons, but true strength comes from the willingness to do what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous. He paused and looked around the hall at all the human faces watching him. The Korthani Empire has ruled through fear for 1,000 years. The Galactic Council maintains order through superior technology and ancient laws, but neither of us has ever faced a threat like the Devourers because we have never learned to think beyond our own survival. Representative Watson asked, Are you saying we should fight these Devourers? I am saying that if anyone in the galaxy has a chance to survive what is coming, it will be humans, HFY replied. Not because you are the strongest or most advanced, but because you are the only species I have met that fights for something greater than yourselves. The session continued for several more hours, with HFY answering questions about galactic politics, military technology, and the Devourer threat. But his most important words had already been spoken. The alien warrior who had served an empire built on conquest was telling humanity that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons, but in their hearts. When the session finally ended, Admiral Hayes approached HFY privately. The Galactic Council is demanding your return with increasingly hostile messages. They're threatening to blockade our space if we don't comply. HFY nodded slowly. They fear what I might tell you about their weaknesses. The Council's power depends on other species believing they are invincible. My survival and testimony threaten that illusion. So what do we do? Admiral Hayes asked. The alien smiled, an expression that looked strange on his armored features. We prepare for war, Admiral, but not the kind of war the galaxy has ever seen before. This will be a war fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. And for the first time in my life, I believe the right side might actually win. Outside the assembly hall, crowds of humans gathered to catch a glimpse of their alien visitor. Children held up drawings of spaceships and alien creatures. Adults asked questions about life among the stars. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. HFY stood at a window looking down at the crowds with Captain Morrison beside him. Your people are not afraid, the alien observed. Should we be? Morrison asked. Any other species would be terrified by what I have told you today, HFY replied. They would be planning to hide or surrender or run to the far edges of space. But humans seem to be preparing for something else entirely. Morrison smiled. We're preparing to help. That's what humans do when someone needs us. The Galactic Council's patience ran out exactly 1 week after Zephai's testimony to the Human Colonial Assembly. 50 massive warships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, their weapons powered and shields raised. Each ship was over 10 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. They had come to take back their prisoner, and they were not planning to take no for an answer. Chancellor Veltar's image appeared on every communication screen throughout human space. His silver skin seemed to glow with anger, and all 4 of his arms moved in gestures that the human translator said meant extreme displeasure. Behind him on the bridge of his flagship, other alien species from the Council watched with cold expressions. "Humans," Chancellor Veltar began, his voice sharp and commanding. "You have ignored our lawful demands and harbored a dangerous criminal. The Korthani survivor has filled your primitive minds with lies and panic. This ends now." Standing beside the Chancellor was an even more intimidating figure. War Prime Thekmor of the Korthani Empire was 8 feet tall with darker armor than Zephai, and scars covering his visible skin. His eyes burned with hatred when he spoke. "The coward who calls himself Zephai has dishonored our empire with his tales of defeat. He must face justice for abandoning his duty and spreading fear among lesser species." Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the command center of Luna Station, Earth's primary defense facility. Around her, human officers worked at their stations, coordinating the response to this unprecedented threat. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of only 12 ships, each one smaller than a single council vessel. By any reasonable military assessment, humanity was about to be completely overwhelmed. "Open a channel to the council fleet," Admiral Hayes ordered. Her communications officer nodded and established the connection. Admiral Hayes appeared on the screens of the council ships, standing straight and proud despite the impossible odds. "Chancellor Veltar, War Prime Thekmor, I am Admiral Patricia Hayes of Earth Defense Command. You are in human space without permission and making hostile demands. I suggest you reconsider your approach." Chancellor Veltar made a sound that the translators indicated was laughter. "Your entire species exists at our sufferance, primitive. We have been traveling between the stars since before your world had written language. Stand aside and surrender the criminal or face the consequences." "Zephai is under the protection of humanity," Admiral Hayes replied firmly. "He committed no crime by surviving a battle and seeking asylum. We will not surrender him to you." War Prime Thekmor stepped forward, his massive form filling the screen. "The coward abandoned his post and fled from battle. Under Korthani law, this demands death. Your interference in our justice will not be tolerated." Admiral Hayes looked directly at the War Prime when she answered. "Under human law, seeking help when in danger is not a crime. Helping someone in need is not just legal, it's our duty. Zephai stays with us." The tension on both sides reached a breaking point. Council ships began moving into attack formations while human defense platforms powered up their weapons. It seemed like the first war between humanity and the galactic powers was about to begin, with Earth's population as the likely casualties. Then something unexpected happened. A new voice came over the communication channel, speaking in the complex clicking language of the Korthani. It was Zephai, transmitting from the surface of Earth where he had been watching the confrontation. "War Prime Thekmor," Zephai said, his voice carrying across space to his former commander. "I claim the right of advocacy under the ancient laws of our people." The effect on both alien leaders was immediate and dramatic. Chancellor Veltar's forearm stopped moving, and War Prime Thekmor stepped backward as if he had been struck. Even through the translation system, humans could hear the shock in their voices. "The right of advocacy has not been invoked for over 1,000 years, War Prime Thekmor said slowly. "You have no grounds for such a claim." "I have every ground," Zephai replied. "I stand accused of cowardice and abandonment of duty. Under the right of advocacy, I may choose champions to defend my honor and prove the truth of my claims. I choose these humans to speak for me." Chancellor Veltar tried to object. "The right of advocacy applies only to disputes between member species of the galactic community. These humans are not recognized as equals." But Zephai had studied galactic law for decades as a military officer. The right of advocacy predates the Galactic Council by millennia. It applies to any species capable of spaceflight and rational thought. The humans have demonstrated both by rescuing me and by standing against your threats despite being outnumbered. War Prime Thekmor was trapped by his own people's laws. The Korthani Empire prided itself on following ancient traditions, especially those related to honor and combat. He could not refuse a legitimate claim of the right of advocacy without bringing shame to his entire species. "Very well," the War Prime said through gritted teeth. "But if these humans speak for you, they accept all consequences of failure. When their arguments are proven false, they will face the same punishment you would receive." Admiral Hayes had been listening to this exchange with growing amazement. She activated her microphone and addressed both alien leaders. "We accept the right of advocacy on behalf of HFY, but we have conditions of our own." "You are in no position to make demands," Chancellor Veltar snapped. "Actually, we are," Admiral Hayes replied calmly. "If we are to serve as advocates under galactic law, then humanity must be recognized as a full member of the galactic community, with all the rights that entails." The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. Council members could be seen arguing among themselves on their bridge screens. Finally, Chancellor Veltar spoke again, his voice tight with anger. "The law is clear. Any species that serves as advocate in a right of advocacy claim must be granted temporary membership in the galactic community for the duration of the proceedings." He paused and looked directly at Admiral Hayes. "But understand this, humans. When you fail to prove your alien friend's innocence, your species will face the consequences alongside him." "We understand," Admiral Hayes replied, "and we accept." What happened next would be remembered in galactic history forever. The right of advocacy required that the accused and their champions be given time to prepare their case. More importantly, it required that they be given access to all relevant information and the opportunity to investigate the claims against them. Within hours, human ships were granted safe passage throughout Council space. Human investigators were allowed to examine the records of the Korthani fleet that had been destroyed. Most significantly, humanity was given access to all Council intelligence about the Devourer threat that HFY had warned them about. Captain Morrison and the crew of the Discovery were assigned to work directly with HFY in preparing his defense. Dr. Torres continued treating the aliens' injuries, while also learning about Korthani biology and culture. Navigator Lisa Brooks studied star charts of the region where the fleet had been destroyed. Engineer Ryan Carter analyzed the wreckage patterns to understand what kind of weapons had been used. But the most important discovery came when they examined the Council's own files about the Devourers. For decades, the galactic powers had been receiving reports of missing colonies and destroyed outposts along the galaxy's edge. They had dismissed these reports as exaggerations or blamed them on unknown pirates or natural disasters. "They knew," HFY said quietly as he read through the files with Captain Morrison. "The Council knew that something was destroying entire systems, but they chose to ignore it because it was happening to species they considered unimportant." "Captain," Morrison felt anger building in his chest as he read report after report of pleas for help that had been denied or ignored. "How many people died because they wouldn't listen?" "Billions," HFY replied. "Maybe more. And now that the threat has grown large enough to destroy a Korthani fleet, suddenly they care about stopping the panic and maintaining order." Dr. Torres joined them in the Discovery's conference room with her own disturbing findings. "I've been analyzing the battle recordings from your fleet's encounter with the Devourers. Jake, these creatures aren't just randomly destroying everything they encounter." "What do you mean?" Captain Morrison asked. "They're selective," Dr. Torres explained. "They consume technology and energy sources, but they avoid organic matter unless it's directly threatening them. It's almost like they're trying to harvest resources rather than commit genocide." HFY looked up from the files with surprise. "That cannot be correct. The Devourers destroyed everything in their path." "No," Dr. Torres said gently. "Your fleet attacked them, so they defended themselves. But look at these sensor readings from the colonies they visited before your encounter. They took metal, energy cores, and technological components. They left the people alone until your military forces arrived and started shooting. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The galactic powers had been preparing for war against mindless destroyers. But the evidence suggested something completely different. The Devourers might not be invaders at all." Captain Morrison stood up and looked at both his companions. "We need to present this evidence to the Council." The trial would not take place on any Council world or station. According to ancient galactic law, a right of advocacy hearing had to be held on neutral ground with representatives from all major species present. The chosen location was Nexus Station, a massive space platform built at the intersection of several major trade routes. It was older than most civilizations and had been maintained by automated systems for thousands of years. Colonel Marcus Webb arrived at Nexus Station aboard a human transport ship, accompanied by a team of the best legal minds and military strategists humanity could provide. He had been chosen to lead humanity's defense of HFY, not because he was a lawyer, but because he understood both warfare and justice. His calm demeanor and sharp intellect had served humanity well in previous diplomatic crises. The station itself was a marvel of ancient engineering. Miles of corridors connected chambers large enough to hold entire cities. Representatives from dozens of species had arrived to witness the proceedings, making it the largest gathering of galactic powers in recorded history. The air recycling systems worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements of so many different life forms. HFY walked through the station's corridors beside Colonel Webb, drawing stares and whispers from other aliens. Many had never seen a Corthani warrior up close, and his presence created a mixture of fear and curiosity. Some species had been conquered by his people decades ago, while others had avoided that fate only through treaties and tribute payments. "Are you ready for this?" Colonel Webb asked as they approached the great hearing chamber. "I have been preparing for this moment since I first spoke to Captain Morrison," HFY replied. "But I must ask you the same question. Your species has never faced anything like what is about to happen in that chamber." The hearing chamber was a vast dome filled with floating platforms, each one designed to accommodate different types of alien physiology. At the center was a raised dais where the accused and their advocates would present their case. Around the edges, thousands of observers watched from galleries designed for their specific species. Chancellor Veltar presided over the proceedings from his position high above the chamber floor. His silver skin gleamed under the artificial lights as he called the session to order. "We are gathered here to determine the truth of accusations made against the Corthani warrior, known as HFY. The charges are cowardice in battle, abandonment of duty, and spreading false information that threatens galactic stability." War Prime Thekmore stood on his platform and addressed the assembly. "The evidence is clear," he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. "HFY fled from battle when his duty required him to fight to the death." He then filled primitive minds with exaggerated tales of defeat, causing panic and undermining military morale throughout the galaxy. The War Prime activated a holographic display showing the remains of the Corthani fleet. 200 of our finest warships were lost because of poor leadership and cowardly decisions. The survivors' tales of unstoppable enemies are nothing more than excuses for military failure. Murmurs of agreement came from many of the alien observers. The Corthani Empire's reputation for military excellence was legendary, and the idea that they could suffer such a complete defeat was difficult for many to accept. It was easier to blame cowardice than to admit that something more powerful than the Empire existed. Colonel Webb stood up to present humanity's defense. He activated his own holographic display, showing star charts and battle recordings that his team had analyzed during their investigation. "Honored representatives of the galactic community," he began, "we are here today not to excuse defeat, but to reveal a truth that could save all our civilizations." The Colonel's presentation was methodical and thorough. He showed evidence that the Corthani fleet had followed standard military doctrine when they encountered the Devourers. Their weapons and tactics were appropriate for the intelligence they had received. The decision to retreat had been made only after it became clear that conventional warfare was completely ineffective. HFY did not flee from cowardice, Colonel Webb stated firmly. He survived because his commanding officers ordered him to carry word back to the Empire. His escape pod was launched not in panic, but as part of a deliberate plan to warn others about the threat they had discovered. Dr. Amy Foster, who had joined the human delegation as their expert on alien biology, presented her analysis of the Devourer encounter. Her findings contradicted everything the galactic powers believed about these creatures. "The beings you call Devourers are not mindless destroyers," she explained to the astonished assembly. "They are refugees from another dimension, seeking resources to survive in our universe." The chamber erupted in shocked voices and angry protests. Chancellor Veltar had to call for order several times before the noise died down. "These claims are preposterous," he declared. "The Devourers have destroyed entire star systems. No, Dr. Foster replied calmly. They have harvested technology and energy sources from uninhabited systems. The destruction you speak of occurred only when military forces attacked them first. They are not conquerors seeking to destroy life, but survivors seeking to preserve their own existence. HFY requested permission to speak and was granted it by the ancient laws governing the hearing. He stood on the central platform and addressed the thousands of beings watching him. I have served the Korthani Empire for 30 years, he began. I have conquered worlds and destroyed those who opposed us. I believed that strength came from the ability to dominate others through superior force. His voice carried throughout the chamber as he continued. But my encounter with these humans has taught me something that my people forgot long ago. True strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to understand. Not from the ability to conquer, but from the choice to protect. He turned to face War Prime Tech more directly. You accuse me of cowardice because I survived when others died. But I ask you this. Is it more courageous to die uselessly in a hopeless battle, or to live and warn others about a danger they cannot see? The War Prime's response was immediate and angry. A Korthani warrior dies at his post. Honor demands it. And what honor is there in death if it serves no purpose? HFY shot back. What honor is there in letting an entire galaxy remain ignorant of a threat that could destroy all life as we know it? The debate continued for hours, with representatives from various species asking questions and presenting their own evidence. Some supported the Council's position that HFY was a coward, who had damaged galactic security with his warnings. Others began to see merit in the human argument that he was a hero, who had risked everything to save lives. Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams, humanities communications expert, presented perhaps the most compelling evidence of all. He had spent weeks analyzing transmissions intercepted from the region where the Devourers had first appeared. These beings are trying to communicate with us, he announced to the stunned assembly. The communication recordings were unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. They were not words or even sounds in any conventional sense, but patterns of energy that conveyed complex emotions and concepts. With human translation technology, the meaning became clear. Help us, the messages said. Our home is dying. We do not wish to harm. We seek only survival. Chancellor Veltar tried to dismiss this evidence. Primitive translation errors, he declared. These creatures are clearly hostile invaders attempting to deceive us. But Colonel Webb was prepared for this objection. If they are hostile invaders, why did they spare the civilian populations of the colonies they visited? Why did they only attack the Korthani fleet after being fired upon first? Why are they sending messages asking for help instead of demanding surrender? The questions hung in the air as the assembly considered their implications. If the humans were right, then the galaxy's most feared threat might actually be desperate refugees seeking aid. If they were wrong, then their naive optimism could lead to the destruction of all galactic civilization. Dr. Torres, who had been studying the biological samples recovered from Devourer encounters, presented her final piece of evidence. These beings are starving, she announced. Their cellular structure shows signs of severe energy depletion. They are not consuming our technology because they want to conquer us. They are consuming it because they need the energy to survive. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Species that had been preparing for war against unstoppable destroyers suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that their enemies were actually refugees in desperate need of assistance. HFY stood up one final time to address the chamber. Honored beings of the galaxy, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his experiences. I have seen what the Devourers can do when they are frightened and attacked. I have also seen what humans can do when they choose to help instead of harm. The choice before us is simple. We can prepare for a war that will destroy us all, or we can choose a different path. He paused and looked around at all the alien faces watching him. The humans saved my life when they had no reason to help me. They protected me when it would have been easier to surrender me to you. The vote came down to a single deciding factor that no one had expected. Elder Cathara of the Ancient Preservation Council, a species so old that they had been exploring space when most others were still developing agriculture, rose from her platform to address the assembly. Her voice carried the weight of millennia as she spoke. In my long life, I have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, she began, her words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. I have watched species choose war over peace, conquest over cooperation, fear over understanding. Every time the choice has led to destruction and suffering that echoes through the ages. The ancient being turned to look at HFY and the human delegation, but today I have heard something different. I have heard beings speak not of what they can take, but of what they can give, not of how they can dominate, but of how they can help. This is wisdom that my people thought had died from the galaxy long ago. Elder Cathara's words carried enormous influence. The Preservation Council had remained neutral in galactic politics for centuries, serving only as keepers of ancient knowledge and cosmic history. When they spoke, even the most powerful empires listened. I vote to accept the human evidence and recognize HFY as a hero who risked everything to warn us of a threat we did not understand, Elder Cathara declared. More importantly, I vote to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Council and place them in charge of our response to the Devourer crisis. The chamber erupted in shocked protests. Chancellor Veltar's forearms waved frantically as he objected. This is preposterous. These humans are primitives who have barely left their own solar system. They cannot be placed in command of galactic forces. But Elder Cathara was not finished. The Korthani Empire commands through fear and superior firepower, yet they were defeated utterly. The hegemony rules through ancient law and technological superiority, yet they ignored clear warnings of approaching danger. Perhaps it is time for a different kind of leadership. War Prime. Tech Moore stood on his platform, his scarred face twisted with rage. I will not serve under the command of beings who have never faced battle, who do not understand the realities of warfare. HFY looked up at his former commander with sadness in his large black eyes. War Prime, with respect, it is we who do not understand warfare. We know only how to destroy. These humans know how to preserve, how to protect, how to save lives even at the cost of their own safety. That is the kind of leadership we need now. The vote was close, closer than anyone had expected. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia found themselves seriously considering placing their fate in the hands of newcomers who had proven themselves through compassion rather than conquest. When the final tally was announced, humanity had won by exactly 3 votes. Admiral Patricia Hayes received the news while aboard the UES Discovery, which had been retrofitted as humanity's flagship for the coming crisis. Captain Morrison stood beside her as they watched the results come in from across the galaxy. Congratulations, Admiral, he said quietly. You're now in command of the largest military force in galactic history. The responsibility was staggering. Over 500 ships from dozens of different species were being placed under human command to face a threat that had already destroyed the galaxy's most powerful fleet. But Admiral Hayes had spent her entire career preparing for impossible situations, and she was not about to back down now. The first challenge came immediately. The combined galactic fleet that assembled at Nexus Station was a collection of vastly different technologies and military philosophies. Korthani ships were built for frontal assault with massive weapons and heavy armor. Hegemony vessels relied on advanced shields and long-range precision strikes. Dozens of other species brought their own unique approaches to warfare. Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams worked day and night to establish communication protocols that would allow all these different fleets to coordinate their actions. It was like trying to conduct an orchestra where every musician played a different instrument and read music in a different language. Dr. Amy Foster led a team of scientists from multiple species in analyzing everything they knew about the Devourers. Her discovery that these beings were refugees rather than invaders had changed everything, but it also raised new questions. Where had they come from? What had driven them from their original home? Most importantly, how could the galaxy help them without being destroyed in the process? The answer came from an unexpected source. HFY, working with human archaeologists, discovered references to the Devourers in ancient Korthani military records. They had encountered these beings before over 1,000 years ago, but the encounter had been hidden from galactic history. My ancestors fought them once before, HFY explained to Admiral Hayes as they studied the ancient texts, but the records were sealed and classified to prevent panic. According to these documents, the Devourers were fleeing the collapse of their own universe. Seeking refuge in ours, Dr. Torres, who had been studying Devourer biology samples, made another crucial discovery. They're dying, she announced to the assembled command staff. Their cellular structure is breaking down because they can't properly process the energy sources in our universe. They're not just hungry, they're literally starving to death. The implications were staggering. The beings that the galaxy had been preparing to fight were not conquerors, but desperate survivors of a cosmic catastrophe. They were consuming technology and energy sources not to fuel a war machine, but to stay alive in an environment that was slowly killing them. Captain Morrison raised the obvious question. If we can't fight them and we can't ignore them, what do we do? Admiral Hayes looked around the room at the assembled officers from dozens of different species. Human, Korthani, Hegemony, and countless others, all working together for the first time in galactic history. We do what humans do best, she said finally. We figure out a way to help them. The plan that emerged was audacious beyond anything the galaxy had ever attempted. Instead of preparing for war, the combined fleet would attempt to make peaceful contact with the Devourers. They would offer to help the refugees find uninhabited star systems where they could safely harvest energy, without threatening populated worlds. Not everyone supported this approach. Many military commanders from various species argued that the Devourers were too dangerous to trust. They pointed to the destruction of the Korthani fleet as evidence that peaceful coexistence was impossible. But Admiral Hayes had made her decision, and she had the backing of the Galactic Council vote. We will attempt peaceful contact first, she announced. If that fails, we will defend ourselves. But we will not fire the first shot in what could be the last war any of us ever fights. The test of this philosophy came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive devourer swarm approaching the Nexus system, home to over 30 billion beings across 12 inhabited worlds. The creatures were moving slowly but steadily toward the most populated region of galactic space. The combined fleet moved to intercept them, but instead of taking attack formations, Admiral Hayes ordered them to arrange themselves in a pattern that would be recognized as non-threatening by any intelligent species. Weapons were powered down, shields were lowered, and communication arrays were activated to broadcast messages of peaceful intent. Captain Morrison commanded the lead ship in the formation, with HFY serving as his first officer. Dr. Torres worked frantically in the medical bay, preparing to treat devourer injuries if the peaceful contact attempt failed and violence broke out. Throughout the fleet, beings who had been enemies for centuries worked side by side to prevent a war that could destroy all life in the galaxy. When the Devourers finally came within visual range, their true nature became clear. They were not ships in any conventional sense, but living creatures the size of small moons. Their surfaces pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Dr. Foster's team had learned to recognize as a form of communication. The patterns they were displaying now were unmistakable even without translation equipment. They were broadcasting a message of desperate hunger and exhaustion, but also curiosity about the strange formation of ships that had come to meet them without hostile intent. Admiral Hayes gave the order that would be remembered throughout galactic history. All ships begin broadcasting the universal greeting on all frequencies. Let's make some new friends. The response from the Devourers was immediate and overwhelming. The bioluminescent patterns on their surfaces shifted to display what could only be described as joy and relief. They had been expecting another attack, another battle for survival. Instead, they found beings offering help and understanding. Dr. Torres led the first scientific exchange with the Devourer representatives. Using a combination of human empathy and galactic translation technology, she established communication with beings whose thought processes were unlike anything known to science. What she learned changed everything. The Devourers were not just refugees from another universe. They were the last survivors of an entire dimension that had collapsed due to entropy and cosmic decay. They had fled through dimensional rifts to reach this universe, but the journey had left them weakened and dying.